Good evening, everyone. My name is John Mitchell. I'm Treasurer of BCS IRMA. I have an apology from Chris Sluman, who would normally be doing this introduction. Chris is currently cruising the English Canal system on a newly refurbished narrow boat.
Weather's not too good for him, is it?
Well, that's his problem, not ours. What I would like to do this evening, of course, is to introduce our speaker, David Alexander. But before that, you might be semi-interested to know that one of my friends I met this afternoon gave me a book, Man Walks Into a Bar, The Ultimate Collection of Jokes and One-Liners, because she said my jokes were just so bad that I needed a bit of help on this. So, of course, as I was coming along this evening to a meeting of computer auditors, I thought I would look up computer audit as a topic. Unfortunately, the nearest I could find to this, and this is quite serious, was constipation, diarrhea, and incontinence, which I'm sure you will appreciate is actually a pretty good definition of computer audit. However, this evening we have an interesting presentation on the big problem of distributed identity. And David Alexander here is co-founder of Mydex, which is an organisation which deals with exactly that problem. So at this stage, I'll hand over to David to introduce himself and his topic.
Thank you very much. Having spent 2.5 days last week with a BSI auditor recertifying Mydex for the second time on its 3-year recertification journey, which was a profoundly moving experience, as you will all appreciate, but I'm very pleased to say that we did. We had one observation which we will address, but the thing about audit is that as much as you try your absolute level best to design systems that are safe and secure, the audit process, whether it's the internal one that we do or whether it's through the surveillance or recertification, always ends up inspiring you about things that you might want to consider doing. And one of the great things about having auditors come and see you is that they are doing it every day. So the auditor we had done 50 audits in the last 12 months and practices and learning. So a very interesting thing indeed. So I was asked if I would come and speak following a presentation I did at IRMA's fireside chats, if anyone goes to those. And part of it was a debate about whether or not we, you, me, human beings, care about our personal data or whether or not we care about our identity in any way. And there was a sort of premise that people didn't. And I was very strongly of a different view. And I tried to define the problem set. And as a practical man of 59 this year, I've seen a generation squander its existence in trying to solve the identity conundrum. And I would challenge you as professionals to look at this problem set anew and come to some logical conclusions. So my talk this evening is about what distributed identity is. But I'm also going to try and set out what I think the fundamental flaw in all of the thinking at the moment is, which leads us to continually, as this very famous man said, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting to get different results. And I have seen the commercial sector, state actors all try to create identity as a market or a identity solution, and it just does not compute. It does not work. It creates risk. It creates friction. It creates effort. It does not solve the problem.
That's like Theresa May's EU deal, isn't it?
Well, I'm going to stay completely away from the subject of Brexit at this point in time, if I may. But in that point, I was at an event where the cognoscenti or the identerati were all meeting. as I like to think of them, and apparently I'm part of them, but I sort of like to think I'm slightly apart. But there was a really quite profound observation about different models in the world, and there is the state surveillance model of China, where identity is indelibly linked to who you are and your behaviour, and it impacts your access to services. You can't get tickets to go to a sporting event unless you're up to date with your taxes, and all sorts of other kind of interesting models of surveillance. There is the wild, wild west, as it's now being called, the Silicon Valley, the surveillance capitalism, all of those terrifying statistics about how much data is being gathered and modelled, and social sign-in by the GAFAT as they are, although you keep adding another one to it as somebody else comes along, who are making your ability to access services seamless and easy and painless, which is hugely attractive to many, many people because they just want to get stuff done. But it also has a downside and it has a consequence of it. And then we have the European Union, which has put a huge amount, as it always does, into trying to define the envelope of a particular problem set or a particular challenge or a particular need, and they've come up with eIDAS, which has had hundreds of millions of pounds invested in it, but its adoption rate outside of state actors, outside of contractors that are working with government, is very slow. And I sit on the board of T-Scheme, which is looking at being how we provide approvals body for QTSPs who want to become QTSPs in the eIDAS scheme. So we're very interested in that. So those are the three principal models that are going, and somewhere along the line you've got the state actors like Estonia, who have a fantastic story to tell about how they had nothing, and after the Russians left and they had to do everything digital in order to carry on, it was a really easy solution. But if you are a citizen of Estonia and Estonia ceases to exist, that's pretty much it in terms of you trying to move around the world. If you are a dispossessed person or a person who's fleeing from another country, it's pretty much very difficult to re-establish who you are and what you do. So there are lots of problems. And it was put forward at this Identirati meeting that actually the UK may be the place in which a fourth model might come about. Something that was genuinely distributed and person-centred, although, as we will see as I carry on, what that means to different people is quite a different thing. And I think one of the things that I will say to you is that if you think there is a market for identity, I believe that's a flaw. I think identity is just a combination of attributes about you in a given context, and it's part of the infrastructure, and you need to get stuff done. And therefore, there may be services related to verifying specific attributes or undertaking specific verification processes, but this illusion that there is a market for identity where somebody charges money to give you the right to be you, I think is a fatally flawed model. So, as we all know, and what is so pleasant for me is I'm in a room full of people of a certain age. You excluded, so you look far too young, probably. But generally speaking, and you, madam. But at the end of the day, we've all seen fashion come and go. Substance over style is my watchword. Style over fashion. But the herd instinct forces us to believe that the next shiny, wonderful thing is going to cure the world. Cure world debt. Irrigate the Sahara. Do you know which bit of technology is doing both of those things at the moment? If you speak...
AI.
Pardon?
Our wonderful AI.
Oh, no. It's a combination of blockchain and AI with IoT, obviously.
Oh.
And I remember sitting at the BCS's award ceremony on the table with David Evans when he was here, and there was a really charming chap, who's definitely not in the room, who sat there and espoused to China Uwawara and myself and a whole number of literati that blockchain solved everything. And unfortunately, it irritated me a little bit. I have another name for blockchain. It still starts with a B and ends with a K. It's got a CK at the end. And I said, oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Exactly how? And he said, oh, it's just brilliant. Absolutely marvellous. Marvellous. I said, well, in what way? Which problem set is it solving? No, it's just absolutely going to change everything. Yes, what's it going to change? And the problem is, money gets poured into sex and sizzle because it's politically quite a cool thing to talk about, to say the white heat of technology. And I'm not opposed to technology. I'm a platform architect. I look at technology every day, but I actually try to say what problem is it solving, and is there another way to solve it? And as we all know, there are many ways to solve technical challenges. But I don't think identity is a technical challenge. I think it's a fundamental architectural flaw in the thinking that's going on. So let's move on from the irrigate Sahara, cure world debt model. We've then got all of these circular arguments where people go, oh, well, it's going to be brilliant. Well, why is it going to be brilliant? Because it's going to change the world. And if it changed the world, it would be brilliant. And I go, well, no, exactly how? So we get into this, let's add more complexity. And if you are the CIO of a large government function or a large corporate or a charity or part of local government, and somebody comes in and goes, all that stuff that you've spent millions on over years from the technology providers and the Deloittes and the big five consultancies, they are now coming in telling you it was a terrible mistake. None of the enterprise architecture, none of the infrastructure, none of the systems you've got will solve your problem. Please don't look at the proposal we wrote you 5 years ago. It's actually, you now need this. So we've got practices for IoT, AI, blockchain, etc. And common sense gets completely ignored. And I was at a conference where a gentleman who was one of these keynotes where everybody sort of wrote down everything they said, and he absolutely lampooned blockchain. And there were a lot of people, and he gave 5 very specific reasons, which I'm not going to go into now. But people in that room were writing down, he said, if you are funding a blockchain project at this time, even for experimentation, stop it now. Fix the customer experience first. Think about the people you serve. Try and make things faster, cheaper, better, and more efficient. Stop being fascinated by technology and start serving customers. And customers, to me, are citizens, people affected by cancer, people in abject poverty, people who are just trying to get stuff done. Yeah, I've got to renew my passport shortly. I'm stealing myself because it's been redesigned. Yeah. If I can press a button, it all happens immediately with little or no effort, and I get a new passport with a better photograph than the one I got because I've lost 4 stone since it was taken. So that's my wife, who are quite keen about that. I looked at it recently and thought, shit, that's terrible. Sorry about the camera. The bad language. So what I'm asking you to do is really just be practical human beings of the world and think logically about this problem set for a second. So we've seen endless endeavours on standards, haven't we? One ring to rule them all. I suspect there's a few Lord of the Rings fans in this room. But we all know that standards working is really important stuff and has long-term gains over an extended period of time. Unfortunately, the standards world has been infected by corporate sponsorship. It's designed to be a stall or a delay to something coming out while they build a proprietary way of doing things that increases the dependency of others onto their platforms and their services. We have endless sectors working together to agree interoperability between the sector when in reality the citizen is unlikely to move too much. And actually their problems are not so much moving between financial institutions or energy providers, but actually trying to get stuff done in their life across a broad spectrum of things. They don't think in sectors. They don't go, oh, I'm really, really happy that everyone in the financial services arena supports a common standard for doing X, Y, and Z, and that means that if I choose to move from one bank to another bank, it should be relatively easy for me to do. They're actually trying to get something done that's a new transaction, but their bank won't help them with that. They won't say, we'll make your life easier. We'll help you get something done elsewhere because we carry all the proof about who you are and we can give it to you and you can use it somewhere else to get stuff done because, well, no, we incurred a cost in doing that. We must monetize it. So let's create a market. So there are these kind of mad situations where banks spend millions and millions of pounds, as do telecommunications companies, any B2C organisation. They spend millions on customer service and retention strategies, recruitment strategies, and sitting at the very heart of who they are, they hold attributes about individuals that prove things about individuals that would help individuals get stuff done in other walks of their life, but they won't let them use it. Even with GDPR, they're trying to carve out GDPR's definition to go, you can have a copy of the raw data, but you can't have a copy of the event transactions that led us to trust you through a KYC process. It's this kind of lock-in dependency, but no value. Whereas this could be a fantastic way of moving things forward. People don't live in sectors, so I would say to you that my central proposition around distributed identities, we've got this completely backwards. We've had it completely backwards for the best part of a generation, and if we carry on as we are, we will not move forward. So defining identity is a really, really personal thing. Almost everywhere you go, there may be a common set of you, but I guarantee that if you try to create an artificial front door that says you must prove who you are to a certain level in order to complete this transaction, the minute you get through the door, currently, nothing of value happens beyond that. All of the forms you have to fill in, everything that you have to do online is still largely self-asserted. So the actual effort in any transaction, in any journey that you undertake, is still hugely expensive, both for you in terms of timescale of effort as individuals, but for the organisation, they have to spend money checking what you say about yourself. Now just imagine if you clicked on Renew My Passport and what you carried with you was a load of attributes that were verified about you that were true, that could be fed automatically into that process via a secure API, so you didn't have to type anything in, there was no form filling, and it said to you, congratulations David, everything we need to renew your passport is done. It will be dispatched to you. And they go, well, that's fantastic. Why? Because I could serve up evidence about myself. I wouldn't have to create a gate, a barrier to entry, because actually what you're doing as part of that process is proving the things that are necessary to get the transaction done. And this is what I mean about identity as a very personal thing. Universal Credits, when they first started, said, here's an access door you've got to get through. It was called gov.uk verify. And many of the people that we serve could not get through that door.
I couldn't get through it.
Pardon?
I couldn't get through
I know.
Verify door. No.
Many people could not get through it. And that, by the way, Mydex was involved with Verify, and we understand the need for a set of rules that allow you to assess the risk and assurance. That I'm not complaining about that side of it. But the journey was get through this gate before you can apply for Universal Credits. But Universal Credits said the minute you start to apply is when you start to accrue your benefit. And because you couldn't start to apply because you couldn't get through the door, there was a major challenge that came out. So they changed the process and said, you can start applying at any time, but during the journey, you will have to provide evidence that's necessary to complete the journey. And people went fine. So over time, they could build up the evidence necessary and get them to a level of assurance. So it's a fundamental way of thinking about this that people don't obviously get. And I would put forward to you from the work that we do in what I call local clusters, where you've got local authorities, charities, public service bodies providing services to you and me on the ground in the communities we live in, is that the context of any transaction defines what's needed. And sometimes it's almost nothing, and other times it's quite a lot of stuff. We're working on the Digital Identity Scotland programme at the moment, and one of the first transactions that is going through the Social Security Scotland programme is the Child's Disability Living Allowance. And there's a whole set of complexity there. It's not just proving the child is who they claim to be, but it's proving the relationship between the parents, having a surgeon from different people that know that family. This doesn't fit into a front door model. This fits into a mosaic of evidence about that individual, sufficient to say this person, and by the way, some of these people are terminally ill, and therefore they need access. And there are provisions in the law to give you immediate access, but we're creating journeys and experiences that are hugely stressful for people at most challenging points in their life. Now, renewing your passport because you need to travel, or applying for benefits, or simply trying to open a bank account or a credit union account, they are all experiences that can be challenging for people and stressful. So the thing that I just would like us to reach agreement on tonight is that the only person who's ever present, always, is you. Can we all accept that it's always you? Doesn't matter what job it is you're trying to do, you're always there. You are the only consistent member or actor in a process. You want to get something done. You want to access something. You want to apply for something. Yes, you want to configure something. You want to prove something. Just think about all the verbs. You're always there. And whoever is on the other side wants to rely on you and what you say to be true. Yeah? So the relying party language works well, because a service provider who's trying to serve you is got to rely on information that they get. And at the moment, we've turned it around where we don't trust you. We don't give you any mechanism of feeding trustworthy information into the organisation. We get you to go through an appalling customer experience, or filling out endless forms at the most challenging time in your life, repetitive. I haven't got a statistic for how many forms people fill out throughout a year, and I can tell you it's very different in different demographics. Some of the most challenging circumstances, if you look in Scotland, they've got a deprivation index, that the most deprived areas probably have to fill out way more forms than the people who are relatively speaking affluent, because the world kind of works for them. You know, and it's a bit different about having a concierge service with one of those fancy swanky platinum cards versus you've got to phone it up and sort it out yourself, you know. So if you think about it, some of the people who are possibly least able to participate and provide the information are the ones...
Or when you're least able to do it.
Or when you're least able to do it.
I was trying to tell the DVLA that I got pacemakers put in when I was sick, so I could actually drive when I got there. I actually gave up and ended up doing a plain old handwritten form.
Right. And I completely understand. My father is in his 80s, and he had a fall, and he was told he couldn't drive his car until such time as he'd had another scan. And my father used to be a racing driver. Car's quite an important part of his life, but he's a man of honour. He rang DVLA and notified them that he'd been told he couldn't drive. He self-declared himself. And then he went for his scan, and his doctor and consultant said it was okay for him to drive. So he did exactly what he did the previous time and said, oh, I've just been told I can drive, because he self-asserted his right not to drive. And they said, oh, we'll send you the form. And he went, oh, thanks very much. Well, 6 pages. And he just went, well, what, can I not just send them the letter? Anyway, I went down to visit him and my mother said, don't go in there at the moment. He's just opened an envelope from the DVLA with a 6-page form, and he's about to have a coronary. And I said, well, he's got a heart condition. I want DVLA to kill him. Anyway, so all I'm asking you to do is, please, can we face up to the reality that only we are present every time? And all of this good sounding, well-meaning sector initiatives to create the financial passport or the unique identity or something, where they come up with another set of scheme rules to get through the front door, are not working for you. They are some kind of risk management model. And the point is, at the end of the process, the risk still sits with the relying party. So about removing friction, effort and cost. What if we could give that relying party the evidence? They don't have to take such a heavy risk assessment, but they can say, do you know what? We have David's address verified by his local authority, by his energy supplier, and by his bank. We have the same address verified by 3 different people, cryptographically signed, and we can now look at that and go, we're happy. Right, we don't even have to rely on one. We can rely on a blended evidence set. And there's no liability for the local authority or the energy company or the bank. It's just, I've turned up and said, here you go. And then it would say, what's your income level? Well, here's the transaction from my bank. But by the way, the £500 million personal tax account project, do we all remember that? How many of you in the room have logged in to your personal tax account? 3, 4, 5. Okay, because I took that really useful pensions advisory service for people of a certain age, and he said, well, you know, you need to get that if you want to talk about financial, but thanks very much indeed. So I went through gov.uk verify myself, and I did get through, but there was a delay because the photograph that I took now and the 4-stone head obviously had to go and be looked at by a human being going, thank God it isn't the other way round. I can just hear them saying it somewhere in the Netherlands, I'm sure. You did? Right, okay. I think they've stopped that now.
No.
Oh, you can still use Gateway?
You'll be at the gateway, provided you have your gateway passport.
Oh, right.
Passport.
So if we can accept the principle that we're the only person who's always present, surely we'd be better off if we could serve up all of the evidence necessary to prove who we are to the level necessary to complete the transaction. Yeah? Risk profile remains the same or better because you're getting verified attributes. You don't need to create a giant mousetrap. There isn't one scheme to rule them all. Everybody doesn't have to adopt a set of standards. All you have to be able to do is read a digital signature on an attribute served up to you. And if you go back to the person who gave it to the individual, you can do that. It can all be automated. So I think, and please tell me if I'm wrong and you disagree with me, I know it's a small sample, but I'd like to get different demographic profiles. I think most of us want to reduce friction, effort, risk and cost in our lives. I've never found anybody who wanted more time applying for something, more money getting from A to B, yes, or put more effort in, or be exposed to more risk. Anyone here feel the same way? Now, I'm reasonably certain that every service provider in the world wants to save money, improve profit or improve outcomes or better serve the population. They certainly want to remove risk from their lives, and they, if they're doing it right, want to remove friction and effort both for the citizens they serve or the customers they serve, but also for their own staff. DWP do a thing called warm home discount. Now, they've outsourced the front-end capture of that application to each energy company who've interpreted the requirement slightly differently. So if you want to get 3 quotes from 3 energy companies and you think you qualify for warm home discount, how many times do you need to fill out that form?
3 times minimum.
3 times. And how many letters will you get from DWP?
6.
3. They're not that bad. It's not an economist. You get 3 letters. How much do you think that letter costs to process inside DWP an issue?
Probably 12 to 15 pounds.
No, £169. There's quite a lot of checking goes on about your eligibility, entitlement, might need to provide further evidence. And you get the letter back, and then you have to give it to the energy company. Yeah? Terrifying. So,
If you've got that amount of cost, sure it's cheaper to pay everyone.
yeah. But that's another... no.
Literally go, as soon as you're over an age.
Well, even better, if you know who's on a qualifying benefit for warm home discount based on the giant database of 91 million dead and alive people, you could probably presuppose who would be entitled. But there is a process where there is a default assumption of fraud and error. Right? So let's add £169 to each process in order to prevent the fraud and error. And by the way, it's not fraud's a tiny fraction. The error is the big thing. And why is the error there? Because people handwrite stuff. That's a large part of it. People don't pay enough attention. It's not automated. This stuff should be simple. So organisations are spending a fortune trying to do service redesign, to remove friction from customer journeys, to make the experience better. They're trying to increase conversion rates. If you're in the private sector, you know, somebody comes to your website to get insurance, you want to get you through the journey as fast as possible, get you signed up. If you are Glasgow City Council, they are passionate about improving the adoption rate of qualifying benefits for people, whether that's childcare, whether that's access to free transport or employability services or trying to reduce social isolation. It's not that they're not prepared to spend the money and they don't have the budget. It's people don't know about it, or people find it very hard to apply for it. Part of the projects we're working on is reducing all of that friction and effort, but also personalising notifications, to take your point, sir, and actually letting people say, do you know that you can immediately qualify? Just press yes. That's all you need to do, because everything else is done for you. Anyone not want this? Okay. So this is a bit of a slide, for which I apologise, but I'm trying to get the fundamental difference between the current addiction we have for the last 25 years on organisation-centric approaches to things, and what would happen if we empower the citizen to be the purveyor of verified attributes, to prove the things that he needs to do. This is Groundhog Day, isn't it? Repetitive tasks for the individual drives them insane. Managing endless passwords, endless form filling, again and again and again and again, providing the same evidence. But, you know, crazy stories about banks where a person's applying for a mortgage and they say, do you need to give us bank statements? Absolutely fine. Printed bank statements off the online banking accounts, posted them in. They said, we can't accept those. We need real bank statements certified by the bank. The person said, you're kidding me. I just got these off my banking portal. No, they won't do, because there's no certification. You'll have to go to the bank. They'll have to print them for you, and they'll have to stamp them and sign them. Right? And the guy said, well, I'm going to do it, but I just want to point out, you're my bank. Right? Can you not see that? Same heading at the top. You're my bank. Yes, but we're in a different regulated stack, so we can't access that information. Well, can I not just give you consent to access that information? Or can I not just deliver it to you electronically? No. So he had to go to his branch, which he got when he was at university, and he'd never moved it because he'd never been back and never went in, and have to get them to print out his bank statements. They didn't even know why they had to do it. He printed it out and they had to stamp it and sign it with a rubber stamp. And he said, on reflection, I could have photoshopped it myself. Right? Anyway, posted it off, everything fine. That was a member of Her Majesty's government that had that experience and talks about it at conferences, about how mad it all is. So these issues that I keep going on about, complexity, risk, you know, you're talking about audit and risk. How many of these mad processes are going on in the organisations that you either work for, you audit, or you assess? It's just mind-boggling. So in this future, which is safe and easy, happens at the speed of light, under your control, and you go, yes, yeah, that's fine, yes. And you could even set up some really simple policy rules that said, if somebody needs something about me that I hold that will help me complete a task that I want to complete, and they're not going to use it for any other purpose, they can have it. I don't need to be asked every single time. You know, informed consent under GDPR is there as a piece of legislative measure to ensure people are not abused, but there are many other means of getting consent. If an individual says, I don't want to be asked every single time, And I always give the example of my credit card provider, which was Barclaycard. And they rang me up one day and they said, Mr. Alexander, we're rather concerned. We've stopped your Barclaycard. And I said, oh, why? He said, yes, because we noticed that you had purchased firearms in California. And we've never noticed any interest in firearms. And we also note that you're invariably in London or Hertfordshire or Scotland. So we thought this might be a fraudulent transaction. So I hope you don't mind, we've stopped the card. And I went, absolutely fantastic, thank you. And they said, we've posted another card out, it should be with you tomorrow. I hope if there's anything we can do, we can get you to a bank, get you some cash. I said, no, I'm fine. Felt great, felt absolutely great. You know what, they didn't ask me for a security password like Amex do, because I'll never give that out over the phone. How do I know it's you? You know, you've called me on my registered number. A week later, having felt really positive and told this Barclaycard story on a number of occasions, I got another phone call. Hello, Mr. Alexander. It's Barclaycard. I said, oh God, it hasn't happened again. I said, no. I'm from the insurance department. I went, oh, I haven't got any insurance with you. No, we know. I went, oh, right. Can I just take your name? Which department? Oh, you actually work for the bank or you're a third party? You see where I'm going with this, right? So he said, no, we work for the bank. And I said, you're certain? Yes, okay. So why are you ringing me? Well, we've noticed that you've purchased a plane ticket to Montenegro. And we wondered whether you'd like travel insurance. So I said, so you've been looking at my credit card transaction data and you're a sales team for insurance, is that right? Well, I've got a lead. I was told to call you and it just said you bought a plane ticket to Montenegro. Yes, but the only way you'd know that is if somebody had mined my transaction records. So I said, notwithstanding that whole area, because I know that I have not given consent for me to be contacted for marketing purposes at all, the bigger issue is who's accessed my credit card transactions in order to generate a lead for you. So I said, I need your name, I need to speak to your manager, I need to know where you're based. I said, this is a data protection breach or outside of, and the guy went, I'm going to put you onto my manager, etc. And I said to the manager, I said, a week ago, defrauded on my credit card and stopped somebody buying Kalashnikovs in California. And I was so impressed with exactly what I want you to do for me. But you've rung me this week trying to sell me insurance. And I've said, I don't want you trying to sell to me. I made that clear. And you've been mining my credit card transaction data, which turns out is a service they do. You know that? So when you turn up at a site and you use your card, they provide information about profile and preference. So it's very interesting. Whereas if the individual has the data, can configure the service, can get it personalized, can prove who they are to the level necessary to complete the transaction, over 18 for age-related products as an example, yes, on a qualifying benefit, warm home discount becomes possible, get a parking space. There's a whole cascade of what are called passported benefits. And I don't apologise for talking about improving public services and reducing friction, risk and cost, because as we all know, public services are under a huge amount of pressure at the moment to do more, either with the same budget or less. So if you can have a cost out proposition in relation to proving who you are, proving your entitlement, why wouldn't you want it? Versus the cost plus, risk plus model of monetization that the private sector seem endlessly committed to, which is saying outsource the risk to us. We'll charge you £25 or £12 to say you are you. Because the risk still sits with you. And in the middle, there's all these barriers for citizens. So I think, what does distributed mean? Let's forget technology. Distributed, I think, means under the control of the individual. Whatever technology is used for the control surface or control mechanism, wherever the data might reside. Now, Mydex, 12 years into a journey of trying to equip every one of us with a personal data store, a vault, a locker that's under your control, but it doesn't have to be that, and it won't be that overnight. But a mechanism by which that piece of data about you that's verified is your control. You can choose where to use it, use it for whatever purpose. And no one can take it away from you, right? It is proof that I'm qualified. It is proof that I am a father. It is proof that I'm a group scout leader. It is proof that I hold a Barclays card with this credit. Whatever it is, it's proof. Yeah? It's got to be portable across any domain. Think about the stories that we hear about refugees from other parts of the world, and they land on the shores of Europe or land on the shores of the UK, and they cannot prove anything about them. And of course, the story that's always told is the former surgeon, heart surgeon, now driving, now doing manual labour cleaning toilets. They always say that. But what about the person who was a really good waiter and was employed and looked after their family, or was a great chef, or was a forklift truck? What about anybody who can just re-establish their capability, their experience, and re-enter the workplace to prove they don't have a criminal record, whatever it may be? It's that simple. If you can carry this stuff with you, and it transcends nation state, transcends any specific domain, that there's no cost to you to have this basic human right to be you, then why wouldn't we want this? Why isn't this part of the strategic development goals of the UN? And if you look at them, inside all of those is an implicit freedom and empowerment of individuals, but they've never quite fixed this. Many foundations and well-meaning people saying, identity 2020, every man, woman and child in the world will have a digital identity. But there's a price for all of those. There's a price. And you've got to have one ring to rule them all. Everybody's got to adopt the same technology. I'm saying we've got to work better than that. We have to make these attributes portable, recombinable in any form we want. If anyone's a student of the Turing machine, here was a really simple architecture that could be recombined to achieve any purpose. Still dream of building one. And I think if you think about attributes about you, about your life, about your behaviours, they are the building blocks of getting anything done. So I think trust must travel with the data. And to be slightly geeky for a second, this is metadata. This is the data about the data. It could say it was generated, produced on this date. This process was followed to generate it. It was done automatically by a machine. And it's cryptographically signed metadata, which means you can check the data and you can check that that's not been modified. So even if Estonia disappears under the waves of Mr. Putin, the cryptographic signature for that is still valid. Somebody starts with more than saying, trust me. And go, look, I've got all of this proof. I know Estonia's gone up in a cloud and been overrun by Mr. Putin and everybody else. But actually, I can show last month I was employed. I had an income. I had this capability. I've got these health conditions. These are the things I can show you. Who wouldn't want that? So my simple position about distributed identity, notwithstanding endless conversations about technology that I'm sure we could all have and be bored to tears with, is that if I am in charge of my identity, it is the ultimate distribution, isn't it? I carry it. Now, some people might go, do you know what? I don't want that responsibility. Well, if we make it safe and easy, anyone can have that responsibility and it isn't a burden. But there will be people who will offer to host it for you or offer to protect it for you. So there is an opportunity for service to individuals. And many of the service providers that organisations use at the moment, they have to accept portability. They have to accept that it can move. But if we can get this right, we reduce friction, risk, effort and cost. Who doesn't want that? And it can be defined in any number of terms. We have a giant diagram which shows all of these different benefits extrapolated upstream and downstream. It's the most compelling argument I've ever seen for anything, which is why I've committed my life to this, and as my wife says, everything. But it promotes, once you've got this portability of trust, portability of attributes, it promotes trust, it promotes innovation. If you get rid of the data logistics overhead and the barriers to access of information, you can have very personalised services, you can have seamless access to things that you need, and we can all get time back. And if there's one thing that has been depleted in modern society, it's time. We seem to be endlessly busier, nothing's ever switched off. Putting the phone over there, so it's not vibrating in my pocket, reminding me of what's just come in, is a really great moment. But I would also argue that it improves quality, it improves productivity, it improves efficiency, it can improve revenue for organisations, and for public service, which is the area that I'm closest to my heart and we spend our time in, it improves outcomes. And I work with frontline staff on a daily basis, and they talk about the pressure they're under to achieve more with less or the same, and to do right by the. And I know everyone is well meaning. We have spent 25 years looking at this the wrong way. So that's my basic premise about redefining distributed identity, not getting sucked into the fashion statements of technology, but looking at this problem set anew and saying, if the individual is the point of integration, is equipped to control, to collect, to store, to redistribute, wherever and whenever they need to, and they've got to be able to work in health, in social care, in financial services, in energy, in mobile. They've got to be able to transcend any sector. At the moment, the best you'll see is a sector-by-sector initiative. And that just means a terrible experience for the individual. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
David, thank you very much for that. Now, excluding the technological solutions that we may talk about a little bit later and the technological problems, I think it was Descartes who said, I think, therefore I am. Proving the I am is obviously a major problem. Now, my view of this is that I could just submit the sample of my DNA, and as a result of that, they would say, you are. I am, you are. So forget about the technology for a moment. Obviously, there are various ways of doing this. This is a great theoretical proposition. Turning it into something that we can actually use throughout the world, I think is the challenge that you're obviously trying to deal with at the moment.
Yeah, and there are some interesting challenges in that. So the idea that an individual can accumulate, store and redistribute, that's been around for some time. Mydex has been live and certified. There are other people making it possible for people to collect, store and redistribute data. The areas that become challenging are as follows. The first one is the moment of what I call binding you as a person to a set of digital credentials or to a set of attributes. And there are various steps in a person's life where this can happen. Not least, if you think about your national insurance number, you don't get it till you're 15. But you get an NHS number for the first contact you have with the NHS. And there are people who are present at that moment, who witnessed the birth, who associated and linked. I remember taking my son's record from the hospital to Westminster Registry Office and went in with my wife's passport and my passport and registered my son's birth. It was a moment in which he became a citizen of the United Kingdom. He wasn't present, but I was, and I had paperwork from the hospital, and that was the moment when his birth certificate was effectively minted. And now it goes to the Government Records Office and becomes a digital record in a system. But at the moment, there's no way for me as his father, 15 now, he probably wouldn't want me to have it, to bring that back and put it somewhere where when he needs to prove his date of birth, he could just go, here it is. So trust binding steps are happening all of the time, everywhere you go, local authorities, banks, etc. What then happens is there's a mental barrier to the idea of reuse of those attributes. And this is a barrier of, in the private sector, organisations not wanting to allow their customers to use the data that they've verified about them for any other purpose unless they're making some money from it. So they will comply with GDPR because they have to provide data portability. Some of them will try to make that a good experience, and others will make it the most complicated experience imaginable to put people off. But even that data that's defined by GDPR isn't necessarily the data that's really important. But if I went through a KYC process with my bank when I was 16, in 1976, Lloyd's, Sidcup High Street, I can remember going in, I don't know what documents I had, but I got a bank account. I've been with Lloyd's ever since, you know, I'm the serial Remainer. It's not a loyalty question, I just can't be asked, you know, to move. I've got a Barclays card, I think I went that far. But at the end of the day, my entire trust chain in banking with Lloyd's is built on that event when I was 16, and they've never had to re-verify that. And I opened a business account, and they accepted my current account, and I got married, and my wife joined it, you know. So there are these moments where trust is bound to an attribute about you. You get a diagnosis for a specific condition. You get a letter from your consultant. These become points of evidence. So we've got two things. Trust binding, that's an activity that happens every single day, but portability of that, attribute provision of that is one of the barriers. It's not even a data exchange interoperability standards issue. You know, if you're in health, it's FHIR or HL7. If you're in open banking, they've got a whole set of messaging standards and OpenID Connect. That bit's not a problem. We've worked out that you and I as individuals don't really give a damn about standards. So we've made a platform that says, oh, I'm talking to financial services, these are the message formats. I'm talking to health, these are the message formats. The individual doesn't have to know. They're just dealing with who do I want the data to be used with. And the other part of it is making the data independent of the service. So it doesn't stop a local authority having a CRM system or a big database in a billing system. They're going to have the data, but the individual needs to have an ability to have a certified copy of the data the local authority's got, or be able to offer the local authority the data the housing association they're with has got. So it's more about getting organisations to embrace data portability, data mobility, as a means of reducing friction, effort, risk and cost for themselves, improving service to their customers. And that's the journey. This is a systemic level change.
And that's why you said it's 30 years.
That's why I said it's 30 years. You know, we famously coined a phrase 5 years ago that we were on a 30-year journey. I think we were 7 years in at that point. And Mydex operates what's called an infinite patience strategy. And to survive, you have to succeed. And to succeed, you have to survive. And it's an infrastructure thing. Mydex represents the infrastructure layer, not the commercial layer. We're constituted as a community interest company. We're asset and mission locked. We can only do this thing. So it's long haul stuff. And if you look, I've seen your question. If you look, the announcement this week, Microsoft announced the end of something called Health Vault. They pretty much launched that when we were founded. And they spent millions of pounds saying we're going to equip citizens to hold and control their own health records, and we're going to build an ecosystem on top of it, and we're going to get all these SMEs to build apps, and we're going to get the NHS to connect to it, etc., etc. But it wasn't an untethered personal health record under the control of the individual. It was a set of rows and columns in a giant Azure database, as it's now called, and you had an account to log in. And what they found over a period of time was, oh dear, we made it all the Microsoft proprietary protocols. People don't really want to be dependent on that. The SMEs couldn't make any money out of it. The price we were charging for use of it was too high. And people fundamentally didn't trust Microsoft to hold their medical records. So, you know, and there's no criticism of Microsoft. I mean, just fundamentally when you think about it, would you trust Google or Apple or Facebook or your bank with your medical record or your insurance company? Probably not. So there's got to be some kind of idea of a way in which you control that. And the current buzzword, next one to add next to AI, Internet of Things, is data trusts.
No, it's upstreaming.
Upstreaming. But data trusts. And of course they are this marvellously conceived idea that there's a bunch of the great and the good, the elite intelligentsia who in a condescending and paternalistic way will sit in a darkened room and decide what's good for you, and they will then take control of your data and make it available for approved uses. Nothing boils my blood more than that type of language. Gentleman had a question about.
Question.
As you probably know, lots of advanced countries, European countries, they've got national identity card,
Yep.
which makes life much easier for people, individuals,
Yep.
to be safe and easy access to lots of services.
Yep.
I remember Labour government in here in the UK introduced a national identity card, which by next Conservative government they got rid of it. Don't you think we need, in order as a citizen to have safe and easy access to lots of services, to me it's easier to have a national identity card with which I can access to everything I need myself, and not having multiple accounts, multiple identity numbers, passport numbers, national insurance numbers, NHS numbers. All of these numbers is actually they don't work. So don't you think that the major problem is a cultural problem, a philosophical problem, and a political problem, rather than a technology or?
You could
I
put all the data on the card, couldn't you?
Sorry?
You could have it all on the card. All your data could be on that card.
Yeah.
I think I can unequivocally say that I'm not in favour of national identity cards, and there's no context in which I could ever believe that they were a good thing, for a whole set of reasons I could go on and on about. But let me throw back to you that the solution that you're saying is, as an individual, if I had an easy mechanism of proving who I was seamlessly and easily, that could integrate my life and let me get things done frictionlessly, I would have it. I think that's what you're saying. But you've picked a national identity. I'm saying, what about a personal identity card that's a virtual thing under your control?
I'll give you one example.
Yeah.
As I've got three nationalities. So I went to airport and I realized my passport expired.
Right.
So I went to the police. The police is, unlike UK, you have to go to border agencies,
Right.
lots of agencies.
Yeah.
There's only one single entity in many countries. I went to the police and I provided my national identity card. They gave me a passport in that airport, which for 30 days, and then I can come back when I come back, renew it.
So the fact that you had a thing that asserted your identity to a level of confidence and trust that they could accept was the reason they gave you a passport.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I'm saying there's nothing wrong with that scenario.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is there's ways to do that today which don't require a nation state to control your identity.
Well, that's the difference.
That's what a national identity card is. If they decide to invalidate your national identity card, you are left without identity. Whereas I'm saying, if you have a personal identity card, virtual, right? If you have a thing that says, and I love the scenario of, three nationalities, travel to different parts of the world, he had passports that didn't have certain things. Part of his past life. I have multiple roles in my life. I'm a scout leader in my spare time. I'm the treasurer of a community-owned shop, chief executive of Mydex. I've got different email accounts, different contact details for all of those, and I need to switch between those personalities. But there are some common threads that I can link to them all. But I don't need the government to make that possible. What I'm saying is I can be me regardless of where I am in the world.
Do you think if companies start viewing identity as just the oil to make their transactions easier, instead of trying to use them as a revenue source, that we'll see much more adoption of this?
I think so, and what I've noticed, particularly in the private sector, is you go to conferences talking about identity, and they say we've got big brands there, big banks, big mobile companies, etc. And when you actually go and see the people that are in attendance, they're not the people who serve the customers. They're not the people that are trying to sell insurance or provide current account banking services or mobile phone services to people. They're not any of those people. They're not the customer service people. They're a little group of people who are trying to monetize the data the bank has about you in order to create a new service they can sell to other organizations, not even you. And all they want you to do is be a passive participant by saying it might make your life easier. Now, the crazy thing is, they're all sitting there thinking we can make money out of it. But if you know Google, Facebook, and Twitter, who today let you log in almost anywhere because it's a fantastic way of acquiring more information under the corporate surveillance model, they go, brilliant, you've now gone onto a site, look at that. It was only a guy on the news today, wasn't it, who put up those false adverts on porn sites and then started extracting money out of them. It's not a million miles away knowing exactly what you're doing. But if you looked at somebody like Apple, Apple don't let you log into anything with the Apple ID. The only thing you can log into with Apple is the Apple ecosystem. So their model is, I'm building a fantastic sandpit in which everybody's safe. But you've got to use everything in Apple. So if you want anything, you've got to come inside, right? I live in a world which says I need to be free. I need to be able to access any service that I want. I need to be able to make things portable. I need to cross all the boundaries, and I need to be free. I don't want to be locked into anybody. And most people will move. I wrote a book on CRM, and I described this concept of a serial switcher. And this was the kind of informed consumer who spent their life. They have no loyalty. They just basically jump from one thing to another. And back before they started doing transfer charges on credit card balances,
That doesn't matter,
right?
If you're making enough revenue,
Exactly.
off of that customer anyway.
Exactly. Retaining a customer, measuring their future lifetime value, delivering exceptional service. That's what it's about. I sat in a room at a telecommunications company with a chief executive who was in a different part of the world with the top management, and they had promoted that they spent £47 million a year in the UK on customer loyalty and satisfaction, but they couldn't understand why they'd help their customers get stuff done elsewhere. We can't possibly do that, they'd leave us. And I said, well, hold on a second. If you give them their data back, and you equip them to go and get other stuff done in their life, what you're telling me is they'll immediately move to Vodafone or some other provider. So why are you spending the £47 million on loyalty if there's no loyalty? And they went, what do you mean? I said, well, if lock-in is your strategy so that you make it impossible for them to leave because you don't help them get anything done, you don't make stuff portable, then why do you need to spend £47 million on loyalty? And everyone was stunned silence, and the chief executive said, Mr. Alexander makes a very, very good point. Why are you all here? I was not popular. But so I think your point is, if you serve your customers well, and if you're a local authority, that means making sure they get access to services entitled, reduce social isolation, reduce deprivation, improve employability, give them access, create a great community. If you're a bank, it's protect their money, provide them with the services they've asked for, think ahead, try and anticipate their needs, whatever it is.
And surely verifying identity through bank is the best added value on your account.
Yeah, just imagine a bank. Your bank said to you, look, many years ago you became our customer and we've got 5 years, 10 years, 20 years of history of dealing with you. We know where you've lived all those years. We want to help you get stuff done elsewhere. So any time somebody needs to be confident that you are you, please just use this data which we're giving you, which we've cryptographically signed. You can't modify it, but you can serve it up anywhere and it will go back to a public key that they can check that it's come from us. And it's just an added value bonus of working with us. People go, oh, that's really useful. And they've market tested that. Energy companies, mobile phone companies, every single, 90%, wow, that's really useful. and they never got it over the line. Why? Because whoever was doing the research wasn't the person that dealt with customer loyalty and future lifetime value. They were somebody trying to build a market for identity. Right? And there is no market for identity. There's market for advice on access control, there's market for advice on how do I assess risk, market advice in terms of understanding the safety and security of transactions. But there isn't a market. Charging money for you to be you is just pointless. It's not a business. And it's going to go away. You just imagine we get to a fully digitally enabled society sometime in the next 30 years. All those chumps that were trying to build an identity business are going to go, it was best we got 10 years, wasted a load of money. We could have just actually increased the loyalty and satisfaction of our customers during that time and spent half the money for twice the result.
Thank you, David. We may have self-identity before Brexit, but the one thing I hope I can guarantee is that outside there may be some refreshments for us. David, thank you very, very much for a very interesting presentation. It certainly made me think about me, which I haven't had a chance to do for quite a long time. And I really look forward to moving on from this to actually how do we make this into a preposition that people can actually use?
Well, we spent years trying to sort of explain it at a policy and strategy level, and we continue to do that. But actually we decided probably 3 years ago that what we need to do is build proof points and make it work on the ground. So most of our work is in communities, working in clusters, whether it's Glasgow City Council, Macmillan Cancer Support. We did a tackling fuel poverty in Renfrewshire. So it's building real-world evidence of what happens when you make attributes flow and you remove friction, risk, cost and effort. And it's really starting to take hold. And the great thing is the Scottish Government have identified empowering individuals and to be attribute-led in their approach rather than sector-led is a key part of it. And they've even mentioned, God bless them, personal data stores. We couldn't ask for more, could you? But obviously that's policy, getting it onto the ground's a different thing. But, Digital Health and Care Institute up there has spent 4 years working on things called backpacks, which are portable health records called untethered PHRs. We are part of that. So I think it's coming from the edge, not from the top. And I think by the time we've got all of these proof points, if we do it one cluster at a time, we've got a project in Scotland now rolling out this approach in 5 clusters across Scotland, fixing public services, removing all of that friction and effort. And that's our mission. So, changing the world one cluster at a time is how I sort of think of it.
Thank you, David. Can we show our appreciation, please?
And slides are available if anybody wants them, obviously.
Well, we've recorded this.
Yes,
We'll
indeed.
go onto our website with your slides. It's all synchronised.
Oh, brilliant.
So,
All right, that's great. Sorry about my laptop. That's caused me.
well, all I can say is we're grateful.